Right, everyone seems to.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for attending our third online careers seminar. If there's a silver lining to COVID, it's that we've been able to reach out probably to far more members of the profession to engage in these types of seminars that they wouldn't have time to come and do in person. So we can always look for the silver lining, and it's great to see so many of our students here engaging with us as well. So before I introduce our speakers, I'll just let you know, as we've done with previous careers seminars, each of them has agreed to speak for about 10 minutes to you, give or take, about their own career journeys and perhaps share some advice that they might have. And then it will be open to you to ask questions. Feel free to start typing questions in the chat before we get to that part of the presentation. And then we can go straight to your questions once the presentations have finished. So I'm delighted to welcome our 4 presenters today. All but one is a good old Griffith grad, but we don't hold that against you, Carl. You were stuck in Melbourne and had no choice, obviously, but to study at Deakin. And I know some really good people from Deakin as well. But Carl is at Wyndham Destinations as a senior legal counsel, so in-house legal counsel there, and takes Griffith students as interns. So that's fabulous. Thank you so much for offering that experience to our students, Carl. And then we've got Jason Carlson, who's a partner at Grace Lawyers, working in litigation and dispute resolution. And Jason's a Griffith alumni. Nice to see you, Jason. And we've got Isa, who was the president of the Law Students Association down here at the Gold Coast in his final year, made a fantastic contribution, is now a solicitor in banking and finance at Herbert Smith Freehills. And Adam Saunders, who's another Griffith grad working in insolvency and commercial litigation, which is actually what I did for a few years as a solicitor as well. So good choice, Adam, very interesting work. And Adam's doing that in a boutique Brisbane law firm, James Conomos Lawyers. Yeah. So thank you so much for giving up your time. We really appreciate it. And I think if we might go to you first, Jason, if that's okay.
Sure, not a problem. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason. As said earlier, partner over at Grace Lawyers. I'm 34. I was appointed to the partnership here when I was 29, which is relatively young. So my career journey, I suppose there's a unique aspect to it in the sense that I always wanted to be a lawyer when I was growing up. I started debating in year 3 and people couldn't really shut me up ever since. And I was told even, when I did my first debating as, at year 3, after the debate, I remember one of the parents of someone that I was debating with said that I'd make a real good barrister. And I didn't know what that word meant. And I learned that actually meant someone who made coffee. So I was a little bit disheartened. But eventually my mum explained that it really means a lawyer and spoke to me about what a lawyer does. And my eyes were set on it ever since. And I continued, debating throughout high school. And then, of course, when I joined Griffith University, I continued doing mooting and all the negotiation competitions. Basically, I talk underwater. And I remember I was doing I think it was the combined civil procedure and evidence mooting assessment. And I don't know if you still do it this way today, but certainly back in the day for me, Griffith University would bring in judges to preside over those moots. And Judge Newton, now retired of the district court, was presiding over the evidence moot that I was doing then. And he looked to my partner and I and said, "Look, you both did quite well today. I was very impressed. Do either of you have any intentions to go to the bar?" And I looked very seriously at him and I said, "Well, Your Honour," I was a bit nervous. I said, "Well, Your Honour, yes, this is the last afternoon of the assessments and we're all going to go to the uni bar after this. Would Your Honour like to join us?" So even that late at law school, I didn't know what the bar meant. It was all very foreign to me. All I knew what was right in front of me. So even in my 4th out of 5 years of law school, the legal profession was very, very foreign to me. And I realized then that if I was going to get serious about being a lawyer, I ought to figure out what it really means. Because law school is one thing, the practice of law is something else entirely. So I took an opportunity to apply for all the summer clerkships, and they were very prolific when I was going through university. I graduated in 2008, so I did my first summer clerkship in 2007. And I got into a firm called Clayton Oots, and I was very grateful for that opportunity. And I worked in their employment team for a few weeks, and then I went into their litigation dispute resolution team. So after just over a month of doing this summer clerkship, I had no idea what to expect, and you feel as though you're thrown into the deep end. But as someone that runs a firm now, I can assure you that the clerks don't get thrown into the deep end. It's a very overwhelming experience to go into a law firm because it's a very different environment to what most people are accustomed to. But I got out of my summer clerkship there, and I said, yes, this is definitely for me, particularly doing commercial law and litigation law is absolutely up my alley. So my sights were very firmly set on that. And then, of course, in my final year, you go through the graduate process of trying to secure a position in a law firm. And I interviewed with many, many firms, and I ended up choosing a firm on the Gold Coast. They had a Gold Coast office and a Brisbane office, and they were what you'd call a boutique practice. But boutique, there are about 40 to 50 people working across both offices. So boutique is relative, I suppose. And despite, interviewing and getting to the final stages with mid-tier and top-tier firms, I ended up going for this firm because I was very impressed by the people that interviewed me. The managing partner of the firm was involved in the grad interviews, the partner for their litigation team as well. And I ultimately made the choice to go with them, not just because they offered me a litigation position, but I was impressed with the people who interviewed me, and I said, these are the sorts of people that I want to work with. I'm getting the right energy from them. I feel as though my early career is going to be in very safe hands. So I joined that firm, and I stayed with that firm for 7 years. And what I realized within my first sort of 3 to 6 years of practice as a law grad is that you have to learn a lot of new things. The most important thing for me was learning how to write. And that might sound strange to you because you're all writing every single day, I imagine, in law school. But when you're in practice, it's a different form of writing. It's a different form of communication. And that was the first bump that I had to get over. The second bump that I had to get over is that no one's a general practitioner anymore. As far as I'm concerned. And the firm that I went into did litigation in very specific industries, namely in the strata industry and the planning and development industry. And that's what I really cut my teeth on. So I learned at a very early stage that not only do you have to acquire legal skills, but you need to acquire industry-specific skills. You can know all you want to know about the law, but if you don't understand the industry that your client is operating under, then the advice that you're going to give will fall flat to them if it doesn't speak the language that they're accustomed to and doesn't ultimately achieve commercial goals that they're looking to drive to. So I continued in the strata industry, and the firm that I'm a partner of is a national strata law firm. So I fixed my sail on this particular industry, and all I'd say is that there wasn't anything really in law school that prepared me for that industry focus. I was in law school for 5 years, and they teach you a number of different areas of law. They did cover strata for 2 weeks in the second component of the property law subject. And I will be honest with you all, the first strata law lecture that I attended, I attended because I'd had a few too many beers at the uni bar and I wasn't ready to drive home. And the second week I didn't attend, but that didn't set me back. It was more the skills that you're taught and the discipline that you're taught and the working ethic that you're taught in university sets you up nicely to transfer those skills into practice. Then looking at my career journey in practice, as I said, I was at Hines for 7 years. And it was about when I reached the age of 28, I started setting my sights a little bit further. I was a senior associate at the time. I started to have discussions about entering into the partnership. And the same reasons that brought me into the firm is sort of what led me out of it. I just realised that I didn't want to go into the partnership of that particular firm. But being a rather ambitious fellow, I went to the wider industry, secured a position at a mid-tier firm. And then after a year, I was what people in the industry call poached. And I was poached across to Grace Lawyers as a partner at the age of 29. And I've been there ever since and worked very diligently at building their Queensland practice from a 3-person firm to a 10-person firm at the moment. And it's been a very, very interesting journey, and it's going to continue. And that's what really taught me the last 5 years, that there are many different types of lawyers, and the lawyer that I've become, given my career journey, is not the barrister that I was told I ought to be back in year 3. A barrister is just one of the many streams that you can go down in the legal industry. I ended up finding in my late 20s that the particular skill or interest that I have is in business generation and leadership, and particularly people management. And I remember that when I signed on as a partner, one of my fellow partners took me out for dinner and said, look, now that you're a partner, you're no longer a lawyer, you're a people manager, you're a confidant, you're a psychologist, you're a relationship counsellor, and you're a performance manager, fundamentally. And that's ultimately what I enjoy doing. It's building client relationships and looking after people within the firm to build their careers, to do the best that we can in practice. So in a nutshell, that's me. I think that's my 10 minutes.
Thank you so much for that, Jason. And I think that there'll no doubt be some questions at the end too. It's really interesting how you found yourself in this particular niche, which you were never particularly interested at law school. In fact, didn't really encounter at law school, and yet here it is. And I think there's a really good message there about being able to be open to opportunities, and a message for our students. So we're going to hear next from Isa. Take it away.
Hi, Therese. Hi, everyone. So my name's Isa. I'm a solicitor with Herbert Smith Freehills, or HSF, in our banking and finance team. And our team up in Brisbane is completely transactional. So on the other end of the spectrum to Jason, so no litigation or disputes here. So we set up and close transactions and deals, and our RTI or disputes teams will handle them when they go bad or when there are issues down the track. So we're what you call front-end lawyers. I also believe I'm the most junior member on this panel. So I graduated from Griffith in 2017. So I've been at Freehills for 2.5 years now. So to give you a bit of background on my career journey. So law was really my second career. So I did my first bachelor's at Bond in international relations. And I worked in the Middle East for a year with a project management company there. And, it wasn't really for me. And law was something that I always wanted to do, but I think I was a bit too scared at the beginning to really pursue it. But I think, working in an area that I wasn't interested in really pushed me to try something else. So I enrolled in Griffith in law. And I've really taken the traditional, kind of top tier route. So I clerked at Freehills in January of my last year of my degree, and graduated from Griffith later that year, and started as a graduate in early 2018. So while I was at Griffith, I really was involved in a lot of the LSA events and competitions. So I competed in the client interviewing competitions and negotiation competitions. And I think I really got a lot out of those. And they were really directly transferable skills that I use in my work now. So I definitely recommend everybody, try those competitions. And I was fortunate enough, as Therese mentioned, to act as president for the LSA in my final year. So I'm a huge supporter of the LSA and everything that they do. So, I'm not too sure how familiar everyone is with how the graduate programs work with some of the larger firms, but most will have you complete a number 2 or 3 rotations across different practice groups. And the intention is that it's a try before you buy approach. So you get to try those practice groups to see if you like them, but it also works both ways. So those groups get to see if they like working with you and whether that work is suitable for you as well. So I completed my first 6-month rotation in our projects and infrastructure team. So I worked on a number of different infrastructure matters. Probably the key highlight from that rotation was acting for a project consortium on their Cross River Rail bid. And so that was, it started before I joined the team and it finished after I left the team. So it's a huge project that, numerous teams across the country were involved with. But I rotated out of that team. And, while I liked it, I didn't really know from those 6 months that was something I wanted to do. So I was still a bit open to trying different things. I rotated into our finance practice and, almost from the very beginning, I knew that team was for me, that work, was for me. So, the work was fast paced, very transactional, and right from the very beginning, you work very, very closely with clients. And I know in some other teams in our firm, it might be several years down the track before you're really kind of trusted to, deal directly with the client. But, finance I found is a very, you're given a lot of responsibility from the very get-go. So I let my supervising partner know from the very start that I was really interested in finance. And so we agreed that I would do my 3rd rotation, so my next rotation as well in finance. So I really only had a taste of 2 of our practice groups in the firm. And then towards the end of the graduate program, I was offered to go to Singapore for 6 months to complete an additional rotation in our aviation finance team. So that team just does completely aviation finance and aviation leasing, and some of their clients are, Singapore Airlines, AirAsia, and that was a really fantastic opportunity as well. That a lot of the larger firms will offer some of their graduates in Australia. So as I mentioned, at the start, I've been with HSF for 2.5 years, and I've been involved on a number of different deals. Like US bonds transactions, refinancing, advised Singapore Airlines on their acquisition of 10 Airbus A380s. And probably a key highlight has been acting for the New South Wales government on their whole of banking contract. So it's one single contract wherein every agency across New South Wales agrees to be provided banking and financial services from a panel of banks. And that deal was described by the AFR as the largest banking contract in Australia, measured by the sheer volume of transactions that are done under that contract. And now I'm working very closely with my partner on Victoria's equivalent contract. So that kind of work might not be for everybody, but it's something that I really find very interesting, and it's very fast paced, and can be stressful, but it's also very thrilling at times. In terms of my insights to the next generation of lawyers and law graduates, I know it might seem like the worst possible time ever to be entering the market as a graduate, but I'm very optimistic about the demand for legal services going into the future. From my experience with our firm, a lot of businesses need really high quality legal services to guide them through, the intra-COVID period, and especially, once we get out of COVID, that they'll need, a lot of assistance from the legal market. And I think my advice to new graduates would be to, look at the market and see what areas of law are really in demand at the moment. So I know that our RTI, so restructuring and turnaround and insolvency practices, are going ballistic at the moment. And, you know, I don't have any personal experience here, but, you know, family law, I'm sure there'll be a lot of work coming in that area in the next few years, or tax, or, you know, what have you. So I think it's it'd be a really good idea to look at where the market's going for demand, and you know, consider whether those areas would be something that you really like to go into. You know, as some areas might lose demand in the coming few years. And my single biggest piece of advice to graduates who are entering the workforce would be to practice your attention to detail. I think it can be probably the biggest downfall for new starters at a law firm, because you're not expected to know everything when you first start. You're not expected to be running your own deals most of the time, but you are expected to, you know, pick up those minor errors, spelling, grammar, formatting, that, you know, your senior associate or partner aren't looking for. And if that slips through, it's kind of you're the shield that should really pick up those things. And it can really be detrimental for your development of your reputation in your firm, but also with other firms. So if you're sending out work that's riddled with errors, you know, it doesn't look good, you know, if you're you know, dealing with those people in the future. So I think that's really the thing that I think new graduates should focus on the most. Aside, you know, everything else you can pick up along the way. You know, that's what you know, law firms are for. You know, they're here to train you to do everything else. So that's it from me.
Thanks, Esther. That was great, and I really liked your optimism, firstly, and that advice too, because yeah, I think as Jason said, you learn skills at university, but you really learn to be a lawyer once you're there, and you want to make yourself valuable, and one way to do that is that attention to detail. So that's fantastic. Thanks so much for that contribution. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, and we might go now to Carl, if that's okay, Carl.
Yep, thanks, Therese. As she mentioned earlier, I completed my tertiary education in Melbourne. I was living obviously down there, and Deakin University was the uni I went to. My path wasn't probably a traditional from high school to university into the course and then into the career. So I'd actually, when I finished, I went and did a commerce degree first, and finance was the major. And I did the sort of secondary skill was commercial law. And I guess that sort of gave me a little bit of a flavour and an interest in it. After I'd worked for a couple of years for a company called Computer Share based down there in Melbourne, I took the opportunity at the time to go back to Deakin University and complete a law degree. So I sort of actually did I've done two degrees, but I did them actually completely separately from one another. I was part of an intake at Deakin University, considered the first sort of intake of completing that degree online. And our contact with the university was basically sort of at assessment time, and if we had, you know, a practical component to our specific unit, we were doing it in each semester, which gave me the opportunity to keep working, or basically on a full-time basis throughout my legal studies. So. And I guess the other piece, sort of skipping ahead from an advice perspective, and some of the other speakers have touched on, was I'd managed to get a bit of experience across a number of different areas of law as I was finishing off that degree. So, and I actually utilised contacts from various different parts of life, basically. So, a friend of mine who runs his own firm there in Melbourne, a lot to do with property, construction, body corporate disputes. I was playing football in the same team, same club as him, and obviously we sort of became friends through football. Knew I was still studying and still a student, so I managed to get a summer through with him. I did some work down in Geelong at a firm called Coulter Roach, basically a full service firm. again, it was a connection there, gave me an opportunity to get an insight into employment and HR and IR, that whole aspect of law. So I spent a summer with those guys as well. And actually the final year of my degree, I was working at Maurice Blackburn with a group of other students. We were all sort of close to the end of our degrees, or, you know, at least in the second last year. And, you know, Maurice Blackburn, obviously sort of on that personal injury front, they've got a number of business units in there. And the group I was in, we were actually working in the superannuation department. So essentially assisting people with inquiring with their superannuation funds on the basis if they had insurance, and if they did, whether a claim was possible. So I sort of saw a few different aspects, quite varied and quite sort of different from one another as I was finishing off that degree. And I think, you know, for students coming into the market, you know, you may have an ultimate goal, a really specific area of law that you want to head into. And obviously, if that's the case, definitely pursue that and try and get experience and try and get your foot in the door there. If, like myself, I was a little bit not 100% certain what area I was going to delve in. I knew a few that I wasn't keen on, so I wasn't going to pursue anything along those lines. But it really was about getting experience, getting that office experience, getting that initial mentoring and tutelage about how to write. As Jason mentioned earlier, it is quite different to how you would prepare your you know, various assignments and other things. It's a whole language, it's a style, and it's also, I guess, respect between lawyers, how they communicate with each other in written form. When I graduated, there was an opportunity that had come up to join a really small in-house legal team at a financial and wealth management business in South Melbourne called Docal Perrott Mead. Their business sort of provided a full service of accounting, financial advice, wealth management, asset strategy, that whole thing. They didn't have a legal component in their business at that stage. So I interviewed there and got a role. And our legal team at the time I started, we were only 3 people strong: the director, myself, and an office assistant / office manager. Their whole base of clients were medical professionals. That's sort of how the original partners of that business had set it up, that they looked after medical professionals in Melbourne. And the way they sort of brought the next generation of accountants, financial planners and advisors through was they would send them out to universities, attend various you know, career fairs there, and sort of as the next generation of doctors and surgeons are graduating, they're meeting the next generation of financial advisors, accountants, and sort of build that relationship basically from the ground up until these guys had really, you know, complicated practices that were making, you know, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars a year. The opportunity with Wyndham was a little bit of a strange one in the sense that my youngest brother, he was actually a Griffith University graduate. He did an arts law degree there, and he was living up here at the time. First year, 2012, he started his degree. I sort of made the decision I'd come up as well, just sort of spur of the moment, a little bit of crossroads of life and career where I was going. I wasn't sort of set, you know, totally on my path at that stage. And I ended up getting an opportunity in the legal team here at Wyndham. I started at a very junior level, so probably even a step backwards, really, if you consider sort of how your career trajectory should sort of should flow post study. And a lot of that to do with just contract disputes and sort of, you know, review of contracts. And then sort of through there, really, once you're you know, in a business and you've got an opportunity to show your work ethic, your ability, how you communicate with people, how you connect with you know, people you're working with, and those sort of higher in the food chain, so to speak, I had the opportunity to sort of promote internally, basically. So since 2012, I'd started in the legal team. I'd gone through from junior legal to legal counsel to current day to senior legal counsel within the team. And we sort of, contrary to what Jason was saying, the in-house game, you generally find that people have areas of strength. They've usually brought either from firms or from other in-house practice, but we end up becoming generalists, basically, because we cover such a broad spectrum of work. I mean, the nature of Wyndham's business being hotel managers, developers, and we also have a timeshare club that people join. We cover a really broad spectrum of work. So everything from general commercial agreements, obviously we keep our eye and we're involved in body corporates at various properties because we have a what's called a mixed use model. We have obviously employment law is a big piece for the in-house team, licensing, real estate and liquor licensing. And we have a really heavy and strong compliance function because our business holds both a Australian financial services license and an Australian credit license. We've got a lending business here as well. So, you've got ASIC and the Corporations Act floating around in the background as well. So we cover a really broad spectrum of work for a very small team. And we also cover a large region. So we down here are responsible for Southeast Asia and the South Pacific. And ultimately we're owned by a US company based in Orlando. So the day to day, I mean, in our team, we sort of have areas that we focus on. The stuff that I mentioned, I'm sort of heavily involved with is the general commercial, special projects, property acquisition. We had a number of deals last year where we bought a management company and a timeshare club in Japan. We bought property in France, Italy, and Germany. Closed the deal at Airlie Beach in December within sort of 3 or 4 weeks, which is sort of unheard of. And you consider usually due diligence can take quite a long period of time. So, really busy, very varied work that we do. And I think the students that we've had, both from Griffith and Bond University in the past, we've tried to give them a flavour, sort of a full spectrum flavour of what an in-house legal team does and how they operate. And typically we've tried to integrate them in the team as quickly as possible because the work they've done with us, it's not work where they come in, we just give them a project and, they can spin their tires for a couple of weeks. We give them functional, practical work. And, if they weren't actually doing that work for us, we'd be doing it ourselves. So I think we've provided them some really good insight in the past into sort of how we operate and what we do. So as much as, I think people will find different pathways into different places. When I was at uni, I wouldn't have envisioned sort of the position that I'm in currently, working on the Gold Coast, working in an in-house legal team for an international company. And I guess the other piece around my particular role here with the business is I consider it quite a privileged position in the sense that we work really closely and I guess one-on-one with our executive team. So whether that's the CEO, CFO, head of sales, HR, basically any of the executives we would see and speak to on a daily basis. And not everyone in our business would have that opportunity, but we talk daily. People text each other over the weekend and stuff. So I think when you're working in a really large organisation and where you've been promoted internally on the back of work ethic, communication and relationship building, which is super important in this industry. It's nice to sort of look at how the journeys for me is unfolded. There's obviously a lot that will still unfold as we move forward, but I think sort of an overarching message is that try and if you're not set on a specific area of law that you really want to look into, there might be areas you haven't even really considered. So get experience basically anywhere that you can. You might find somewhere that you didn't consider really suits you. And the other side of the coin is you'll find places that you really don't want to proceed with further. So that's sort of my key things. And I think Isa touched on a really important piece. Attention to detail, critical in the legal profession. It's just spelling errors and grammar and formatting is just absolutely basic 101 stuff. Shouldn't even be an issue. And the other key real things when you join the profession, which don't take any legal knowledge at all, is punctuality, work ethic, and dress code. Dress professionally. Turn up as you're ready to go, and you've been at the practice for 10 years. Not that you just rolled in and you're trying to learn all really simple things on the first day.
Thanks so much, Carl. That was excellent advice, but also what a fascinating career you've ended up with. Just so varied and interesting. And I imagine before COVID, a lot of travel as well. Should have been pretty cool. Obviously, put on hold at the moment.
Yes, unfortunately, I mean the travel, I guess, in our industry is a nice part of the business, because we did have the opportunity to travel to Japan last year, Fiji, and a few other spots, sort of to really, although a lot of deals obviously are done, you know, a lot of it's coordinated via email and phone calls. You know, there are some places, particularly Japan, that still want to see the face-to-face and sign off deals in person, which we did. I think that deal, we ended up going into the Target lawyer's office there in Tokyo about 6 p.m. and we ended up finalising and closing and signing those documents at about 3 a.m. the following morning, just to try and nut out the final bits and pieces, basically.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. And, you know, international travel, I mean, Isa mentioned too, 6 months in Singapore. It's and certainly while at university, our students now have lots of opportunities for international experiences too. So I think that's a really great part of legal practice in this new global era when we don't have COVID. So thank you. Adam, certainly last but not least, do you want to share your journey with us?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me. And I think a lot of my early day journey into the profession will kind of replicate what Carl's touched on there. But I think I came into law, I think, having developed a strong interest in legal studies at high school, which I imagine a lot of people can agree with. But I think I came in not really knowing what area I wanted to go into, but kind of developing an idea as I started to move along that I might want to be in criminal law. So I've changed quite a bit since my time at university, and I think I was lucky enough when I was in my second last year at university that I managed to get a paralegal job at Maurice Blackburn up here in Brisbane, and I was working for them part-time in their class actions department, doing a lot of paralegal work there while I was finishing off my studies in my last couple of years of uni. And for me, that was somewhat of a shock to my system, and something that I know that Jason touched on earlier, that learning office dynamics is a completely new ball game if you've never worked in an office before. And I think that was the first hurdle, I think, for me, coming from being a student and working in retail, having to learn what it's like to operate in an office, but not just any office, but an office full of lawyers. So I think that's an important lesson in itself, is identifying that there's ways that you communicate in an office. And so I kind of saw that first position for me as a learning curve to just learn about an office. It was an excellent opportunity for me to work in that position, and I think it gave me an opportunity to learn about an area of law that I hadn't given much thought to during my studies. But then I think I decided at that point that I wanted to go elsewhere and just kind of dab in other areas of law, because I wasn't really certain what I wanted to practice in and what areas I was drawn to, given that was all I really knew. So I was fortunate enough as well, while I was still at Maurice Blackburn, to do a 4-week placement at the DPP, doing the student work experience with the DPP. So that kind of gave me great insight into working in prosecutions and in criminal law, and definitely a wake-up call that class actions is a slow beast compared to most other areas of law, which tend to be a lot more fast-paced. Which is definitely what the DPP exposed me to. So I did think criminal law was something I wanted to go into, but quickly learnt that I wasn't really keen to be exposed to those types of things day in, day out. And the long hours was something that kind of concerned me in terms of doing criminal law more so than any other area. It was just the long hours of being exposed to that kind of work, which was interesting because I did think at the beginning that I would see myself in that. However, a lot of reflecting and decided that it wasn't really something I wanted. So I still wanted to continue to try new things. And I did start my PLT whilst I was at the GPP. And I was doing that very slowly, and I didn't kind of want to rush it because I knew that I wasn't certain what area I wanted to be in. So whilst I appreciate that many people just want to get PLT done, it's something that I don't regret because I think I didn't want to go into an area, start getting my post-admission experience in an area, which might restrict me and limit where I could go elsewhere if I wanted to. Not to say it's impossible, but I think it definitely was something I had in my mind. So then I moved on there, dabbed a little bit in migration law, and then I ultimately found myself going to a small firm that focused on banking and finance. And they represented a number of small to medium enterprises that would give small business loans and things like that. To my surprise, I actually enjoyed doing the litigation aspect of that, more so than the front end contract drafting for those loan agreements. So then I thought, well, this might be what I want to do. I think litigation is probably something I see myself doing, which I did have an inkling was the case, given I was doing the large scale of that at Maurice Blackburn as a paralegal. And I did kind of think, given the court exposure I was getting at the DBP, that litigation was something I saw myself doing. So then I decided to go down that path, and I've worked for a firm on the Gold Coast in litigation, and wanted to kind of come up and work for some people, which is here at James Conomoth, who have such a focus on insolvency law, and are recognised by Doyley's Guide for the work they do in the insolvency law space. And I think that's something that I see myself doing, and never in a million years would I have thought that I'd end up where I am from the beginning, but it's something that I've found is very technical and very interesting, especially at the moment as well, given the way things are going with COVID. So one thing I think I've taken from my journey is that there's been plenty of ups and downs in trying to identify what I want to do along the road. But I think it's important, if you're a student who is a bit uncertain and not sure where you want to go, I think put yourself out there and try and take an opportunity and get exposed to different areas of law, because it's important that you see if that's working for you and if it's something that you find passion in. And if that's not the case, then move on and find something else. I think myself and Carl are examples of people who have been able to dab in different areas of law and still found our feet at the end of the day, and have been able to have a career and keep growing and developing as legal professionals. So I think never be afraid to give something up and try something new, because it's really important for your career and for your personal growth, and not just professional, to be doing what you have interest in. So yeah, I definitely think I'm enjoying what I'm doing now. And I think from an insolvency perspective, in the current climate, you're definitely going to see a lot of work moving forward and into the future, which is unfortunate for a lot of businesses and companies as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. But I think in terms of the legal space, you're going to see a lot of change and a lot of work in this area. At the moment, for those students who are interested, there's been federal changes with the insolvency laws, putting on a mandatorium with the insolvency laws, extending out the dates in which you can make a company insolvent and issue bankruptcy notices. So it's making things a little more complex in our area of law, in the sense that we can't progress things too far because we are restricted currently, but it's for an important reason, as we can all appreciate, to allow these businesses to try and kick off again once we're through this, or when we do get through it. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I think there will always be opportunities for young professionals, even though that we're going through a tough time. But I think now more than ever, it's important that students put yourselves out there, reach out to law firms and make yourself known, send your resume around, still go for those clerkships, and don't just restrict yourself to bigger firms. Boutique firms offer a lot, and they can really give you some great insight into being a practicing lawyer. And then perhaps later down the line, if you want to move on to a top tier firm, then that, by all means, that's an opportunity that could be available. But I think it's so important to network and put yourself out there and just speak to professionals, because you never know what opportunities will fall in your lap. And that's I think, given the climate and how competitive it may become again, because it already is a competitive market, it might become even more so. So I think put yourself out there, take any opportunity you can, and I think you'll become a successful professional.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Adam. And I think a common theme that's come through with everyone is really being open to all opportunities, and you never know where it's going to take you. I think all of you have said you didn't actually picture yourself doing what you're actually doing now and enjoying. So I think that's a really important message. So we can open up for questions now. Please feel free to turn on your camera and your mic if you'd like to ask any of our panelists a question, or you can type into the chat box. So do we have any questions for any of our panelists from the students? I think that was excellent.
If I could ask a question.
Oh, yes, Matt.
Thank you, Therese, and thank you very much to all the panelists. Personally, I'm a student who is more interested into the environmental law area of things. And of course, as a consequence, I have to go into the commercial area like resource management, trade relations, etc., etc. I'm still looking to apply for clerkships. On what area specifically would you recommend me to go if I want to take this commercial side? What area of law specifically would you recommend me to go? What type of teams would you recommend me to go if I want to get into the practice of like anything regarding the environment?
I can answer that. So I know a number of the top tiers each have their own planning and environment teams. So they do exactly that kind of work. And I know they're always looking for junior solicitors. It's a very in-demand area. And so if you wanted to pursue that, you would apply for a clerkship with, you know, the top tiers or the mid tiers, or even, you know, some boutiques might specialize in that kind of area, and just really specify that that's the area that you're interested in. And I think, you know, a lot of applicants probably don't put that area high enough in their application, so it would really stand out to really, you know, show that that's something that you're really interested in. Yeah, it would make you stand out as an applicant.
Thanks, Isa. Yeah, I think
That is really good to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Any other questions from our students? I was interested, Carl, in what you said about, you know, as compared to what Jason was saying about he now knows everything about strata title from an industry perspective because he's focused on that as a lawyer. And Carl, you were saying you have to be almost a jack of all trades because in terms of areas of law, but I guess you've still got that expertise in terms of what Wyndham Destinations does. So there's that really interesting piece about really getting to know and understand an industry, which I don't know that a lot of law students think about. You know, that you're getting to know your clients and their needs and from a commercial perspective. I wonder if Carl and Jason might want to comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, so you know, from an industry perspective, we've got a timeshare club as part of the business, a big part of the business. So I mean, before I joined this company, I didn't even realise timeshares still actually existed. You know, I thought they were a relic of the 80s European thing. But look, there's a whole industry down here with a number of different clubs, and they've you know, they've got their own association, they've got guidelines and a code of ethics that the businesses and sales staff will sort of sign up and agree to. And then I guess sort of internal to the business, you know, because we operate across quite a large different and varied parts of law. So I've had the benefit while I've been here to sort of really to focus in on, say, that the HR and employment law stuff's become quite a big piece. We've got people working in various different roles, blue collar roles, clerical roles, resort staff, you've got sales reps, right up obviously to our executive team. The large part of what I do started off as the commercial agreements, deals, property deals, and negotiation around those deals. And then other parts have sort of been added to the bow over time. I sort of help a little bit on the compliance side. I'm not fully involved in that. We do have a senior counsel, and she has a support assistant compliance officer that helps her with the real compliance heavy part of the business. But I guess from my own sort of knowledge, I sit across and look into the responsible lending guidelines and all the laws that go with that. With the NCCP Act, you know, it's really, really important how our business lends and that everything's done correctly, you know, right from the application to apply for finance through the unsuitability assessment process, the information that's requested. You know, ASIC's got an oversight over all that sort of stuff. So we've got an industry that we're involved in, and then sort of within the industry, there are other industries that we're involved in as well that we need to be across. So we've got a really large portfolio of stuff that we look after. And if I think of my, you know, head of legal who looks after us, she's across basically everything from PR to finance to hotel finance, general commercial. You know, we're doing property deals in foreign countries, so it's interesting, really, really broad spectrum. Although you still sort of can, you know, there's a few areas that you, I guess, specialize in, so to speak.
Thanks, Carl. Jason, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about getting to know an industry that you're providing legal services to, and how that happens. You know, a lot of our students might be wondering, okay, if I end up working in an area that I'm advising mining clients or the companies all the time, how do I really learn about an industry to provide the services I need to provide?
Sure, but before I get into that, I'll just take a step backwards, and this might seem like a controversial view to give. I think a problem that a lot of law students have when you're reaching graduation is that you overemphasize the importance of the decision that you're going to make about the industry that you're going to go into. You know, obviously you want to be a lawyer, and some people might be in their final year and say, I just want to do employment. Well, if you're applying for law grad roles in just the employment field, you're probably looking at about 1% of jobs that are available to law grads. And if you've got that narrow field of vision that you're absolutely certain that that's all you want to do, you might find that there aren't that many jobs available. And then eventually you start compromising, and then you're competing with law grads a year later after you're an admitted lawyer because you haven't been able to get the right placement. You know, speaking from my own personal experience, I think the thing that you should be focusing on is the people that you're going to work for, because your first 3 years in practice are just so important to make sure that you've got the right mentors, the right support base, the right people to help you grow and develop as a lawyer, because the least valuable people in the legal industry from an employment perspective are law graduates. You're bountiful. There are plenty of you. The most valuable, from my experience as an employer, the most valuable are those with 3 to 5 years post-admission experience. They're rare as hen's teeth, and they command a premium once they can demonstrate that they've got legal skill. They know how to work within a law firm. They're just easy to fit into an existing practice. So to take you back to the initial point, if you overemphasize the importance of finding the perfect job as your first one out of university, you might find yourself disappointed, and you may very well be passing up fantastic opportunities to work with people that would want to nurture and develop your career as a lawyer. But then going directly to the question, how do you learn about an industry when you're in practice? Well, it is from the people that you're directly working with, so your supervisors. When they give you a piece of advice to assist with, or a research memo, asking questions about it. You know, that's one of the features that I like to see in juniors that work in my team. I want to see curiosity out of them. I want them asking questions. I want them asking for feedback. I want them asking what's going to happen in the future. I want to see that curiosity, that desire to learn out of them. Because we mentioned, taking opportunities as though opportunities are going to fall across your lap. They're not. Successful people create opportunities for themselves. And that applies when you're in a firm. You've got to create opportunities out there. You've got to make yourself known to people that have work to give. And you've got to want to put your hand up, because people rapidly develop as junior lawyers with the more amount of work that they do. If you work on 20 files in a 3-month period, you're going to develop quicker than someone that just works in 10.
So, Therese, can I just add to that, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
I echo what Jason said, but I think one thing I've learned in my 3 years practicing is that you often find that you might, especially in the commercial litigation spaces, for example, I have a dispute at the moment that I'm working on, that our client is a company that operates in the solar panel industry, and they're a distributor. And in order for me to truly understand the dispute, and I have to read further and beyond just the law to understand the way that contracts are drafted within that industry, and the way that disputes come about. So sometimes it's not just as simple as reading the contract and understanding the contractual terms and the way that dispute's arisen. You have to sometimes learn the terminology of that industry, and you have to go and read beyond to understand the way in which they operate. And that's something I've learned, is that you have to do that. You have to speak to your client to try and understand the industry a bit more, but also your superiors, who will also be able to give you that knowledge as well from their experience that they've developed over time. So I think wider reading, it will always be a part of being a lawyer. And it's something that you have to embrace as you move into the industry.
Thanks so much, Adam. So Matt, I think you've got one more question before we finish up. Do you want to come back on?
Yes, thank you, Therese. This is a question regarding transferable of skills from other industries. For instance, I've been working in hospitality, like front of house, for the last 5 years. What would be the recommendation from any panelist, especially as all of you mentioned that there is a lot of negotiation, dealing with clients? How could I bring all this experience into a commercial practice, in a CV interview, etc.?
I'm happy to go first. As a law graduate, the reality is that people aren't going to employ you as a law graduate in order to negotiate. It just doesn't work that way. What I look for in junior candidates to our firm is that work experience, not because of what you'd think would be a transferable skill in terms of what you've come across in the hospitality practice, but what I'm looking for is there a demonstrated history of a work ethic, right? Someone that's gone through university and achieved good, respectable grades, and then held down a full-time job or a lengthy part-time job, that shows me as an employer that they're ready to work. In fact, the ability to work is ingrained into them. So to me, that's what you should be selling with that sort of background. It's not necessarily something that you might have been exposed to a few months ago in the hospitality industry. It's that, hey, I did this amount of hours at university. These are the grades that I did. And by the way, I had to earn my way through it. I made my own income and I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to bring that enthusiasm into a firm as well.
I think just coming directly off what you've said there, Jason, the other piece around it is your time management and prioritizing of key things during the day. So if you've already shown that, you've got a good set of respectable grades, with long hours at uni, you've been working as well in addition to that, then there's obviously a way that you can demonstrate to them that, you know how to manage your day. Which is also sort of pretty critical, particularly for myself, because we've got a really varied, work that we're involved in every day. I might have the best laid plans of how I want a day to run, but things will change, and it's just a matter of making sure you prioritize the right things and managing your time effectively to get everything done.
Fantastic, thank you. We've got one last question to squeeze in that's come through from Dennis, which is whether the level of responsibility early on in your career, so when you're a graduate to sort of early post-admission, differs between those boutique and larger firms. So I guess we've got Adam in a boutique firm and Issa in a larger firm. Maybe we could compare notes on, do you have to get everything signed by a partner, or do you run some stuff yourself, or how does it work, and is it different?
I'm happy to go first from the boutique perspective. Everything that I do is overseen by at least one senior person. So here, that might be a senior associate or one of my directors here. And so generally what they will do is I will have the matter, and we might need to prepare proceedings, or like it could be any task, drafting a letter to the client, drafting advice to the client. I would prepare that from the outset, and then I would pass that on to my partner or the senior associate for them to review that. And then that would tend to be a little bit of back and forth about, or even phone discussions about what needs changing, or what things need to be emphasized. And then ultimately it goes from there. But from what I can understand is that there's a reason that we do it that way, and it's to ensure that as a junior that you're not just sending out something that's giving incorrect advice, but to ensure that everything's correctly prepared and done in line with the firm's precedents and things like that. And of course, your partner has the experience to ensure that that's happening. So it's the best way, I think, for a junior to grow is to get that mentoring from someone senior and to learn the ways moving forward. But yeah, from my perspective, in a boutique, we get things signed off from someone more senior.
Great, thanks, Adam. It's probably a bit of a change from when I was working in a medium-sized firm in, oh gosh, now late 80s, early 90s, when you were thrown in the deep end, yeah, and you ran your own files, which was actually a great training ground, but highly dangerous, I suspect.
I mean, I definitely think, like I often am thrown in the deep end in the sense that I have to learn it and I'm expected to produce work and show that I've taken the initiative to understand the issues and find the legal backing for your client. So that's always something that's expected, but often as a junior, you might not have the experience or the experience to be able to develop the strategy that a more senior person would have developed over the years, because I think strategy tends to, from a litigation perspective, come with experience. So, but I think there is a nice balance that mentors, especially the ones that I have, in allowing me the freedom to grow and learn on my own, but also to ensure that what I'm producing is being corrected, or ensuring that it's of quality before it goes out.
Fantastic, thank you. Isa, did you want to add something from the perspective of a large firm?
Yeah, sure. I think it's very similar to what Adam just described, but it's very dependent on, one, who your supervisor is and the size of the team that you're in. So if you were to join as a graduate in our Sydney office, you know, in some of those finance or corporate practices, you'd be a single team of 20 or 30, and the work that you'll be given will be quite small to begin with. Proofreading, making, bringing across markup or changes from the other side, or summarizing case notes. So very small kind of matters, and I think that's pretty consistent across most of our firm for the first rotation, because they're testing you out, seeing what you can manage. But I think once you prove yourself with those small tasks, it's a very quick transition to the deep end of the pool. And I vividly remember finishing my first rotation in the projects team and going to finance, and in my first week in the finance team, and bear in mind this is 6 months into my time at the firm, I think I was given a matter that was halfway done and it needed to close in 2 days, and it was up to me to get it right to the finish line, and I did. And while it was closing, my partner was boarding a plane from Melbourne to Perth, I recall. And just as he was getting on the plane, it was, okay, I'm going to be on the plane now. I won't have any service, but you got this. See ya. And while he was on the plane, I remember closing that deal out by myself. And it was a real experience. Looking back now, it wasn't the biggest deal ever. And it wouldn't have been the end of the world if I stuffed it up. But I think once you kind of prove yourself on those smaller tasks, you might be given, a bit more responsibility in that sense. But at the end of the day, partners, they're your supervisor, and they're on the line for any real big mistakes that you make. So there's a tendency to avoid negligence. So there's a fine line that they walk, because you'll never learn anything if all you ever do is bring across markup or proofread. So you have to be tested with bigger tasks as you become more experienced.
Thanks, Isa, and we've gone over time, so I'm going to have to wind it up. But I just want to say thank you so much to the four of you for your generosity and giving up your time, giving really excellent advice, and I hope the students, so we've just got a comment in there now. Thanks so much. Excellent advice, especially the postgrad tips. Just fantastic for our students to be able to hear from you. And your unique stories and the lessons that you've been able to share. So thanks so much from Griffith Law School and from me as the Dean, and hope to catch up with many of you at alumni functions and things like that. Carl, you can be an honorary alumni if you want when we once again can meet in person, given that your brother studied with us. So.
Yeah, I'll use his last name.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great afternoon. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.